Hello and welcome to TVC News this hour. President Bola Tinubu has arrived at the People's Republic of China for a state visit on the invitation of President Xi Jinping. Nigeria's presidential jet carrying President Tinubu touched down at an airport in Beijing at about 9 a.m. local time. The president's visit to China is expected to include meetings with top selected chief executive officers of 10 major Chinese corporations with assets worth over $3 trillion across multiple sectors of the economy. During the visit, President Tinubu would also be meeting with President Xi Jinping to sign several memorandums of understanding. The meetings will cover multiple sectors of the economy, including information and communications technology, refining, oil and gas, aluminium production, among others. The special advisor to the president on media and publicity, Ajurin Gelale, disclosed that the president will conduct site visit to two major Chinese corporations, White Technologies, as well as the China Rail and Construction Corporation. He said this engagement is to achieve one of President Tinubu's top agenda items, which is the completion of the Ibadan to Abuja segment of the Lagos-Takano high-speed rail line. Away from that, the special advisor to the president on health, Sama Anas, says the federal government is set to implement the mandatory salt target regulation. This will be part of measures to ensure that Nigeria conforms to the required sodium intake requirement as recommended by the World Health Organization. TVC's Kemi Balogun has the details.
In many high-income countries and increasingly in low- and middle-income countries, a significant proportion of sodium in the diet comes from processed foods. The growing concern on the excess consumption of sodium is gaining more proactive measures to mitigate the burden of non-communicable diseases that arise from its intake. This investiture ceremony for a policy champion and social media influencer for salt target regulations in Nigeria is one way to do this. Special advisor to the president on health, who doubles now as a policy champion for salt, says this will be done through several approaches, like promoting sustained advocacy on healthy living standards, as well as through the implementation of the mandatory salt target regulation.
I will also engage with key stakeholders, policymakers, health professionals, and the public to emphasize the importance of implementing mandatory, we call it mandatory salt target regulation. It is a must. We need to make a strong evidence-based case for these regulations to ensure they are adopted and enforced as part of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's agenda.
I also dedicate the appointment to the countless Nigerians affected by non-communicable diseases related to excessive salt consumption. It is my hope that our efforts will improve their lives and the lives of future generations.
Globally, an estimated 1.89 million deaths are associated with consuming too much sodium. These experts say reducing sodium intake is one of the most cost-effective ways to improve health and reduce the burden of NCDs.
We have made significant progress, but there's still plenty of work left to be done. Let us continue to work together to drive change and create a healthier future for our country.
This excessive consumption of salt has been estimated to account for 10% of cardiovascular disease-related deaths in Nigeria. And I always say that this is an estimation. This is just like the tip of the iceberg. It's much, much higher than that.
The World Health Organization recommends that all salt taken should be iodized, which is essential for a healthy brain development in the fetus and optimizes people's general mental function. Kemi Balogun, TVC News, Abuja.
Let's turn our attention to the recent policy of the federal government banning students below the age of 18 from writing the West African Examination Council and the National Examinations Council. Some commend the decision, while others describe it as an anti-people's policy. TVC News' Helen Osamide Akins has more.
Those modalities and processes are
Earlier a week ago, the federal government announced that individuals under the age of 18 will no longer be allowed to participate in National Examination Council and the West African Examination Council. The Minister of Education, Tahir Mama, declares that the policy is not new but has been in place for some time. The Nigerian education policy recommends that a child should start at the early stage of education from age 0 to 5 years, primary school from 6 years old, the junior secondary school from 12 to 14 years, while the senior secondary education should commence from 15 to 17 and tertiary education is expected to begin at age 18 or older, depending on their academic progress and other factors. These age recommendations are meant to help structure the education system in Nigeria, ensuring that children progress through the different levels of education at an appropriate pace. Over the years, this policy has been pushed aside due to the proliferation of private schools as children below 15 years now graduate from secondary schools. In a bid to set the record straight, the President Bola Tinubu's administration, through the Ministry of Education, has been very vocal on the need to follow the existing policy on recommended age.
As we are approaching,
That pronouncement by the Minister of Education seems not to go down well with many Nigerians. Emmanuel Ikodo is a father of 3 whose daughter graduated from the university at age 21. He is opposed to this decision, saying it is not a well thought out policy.
In this part of the world, we have married women who are less than 18 years old. Are we saying our girl child is good enough to be married but not good enough to be schooled? I wrote WAEC at less than 17 years old, and that was many years ago. So are we progressing or we are retrogressing?
But on the contrary, Olushola Bankole, an educationist, commends the federal government decision, believing it will go a long way to reshape the country's education system.
Talking about the need for children not to be hurried through school. It's becoming an hydra-headed monster in our education system across Nigeria, such that we don't even have primary 6 in most schools.
I embarked on a fact-finding mission to discover how other countries handle similar policy. I spoke to some Nigerians who are residents in the UK and America. Yetunde Kamsi is an educationist, an accomplished professional in education, child protection and safeguarding, a curriculum and policy development expert who shared insight on the United Kingdom's education system.
You can't take a child in to primary school unless they're 5. So there's no way a child would finish their schooling before the age of 16. Do you understand? There's a process in place. There is a process in place in the UK, of course. Schooling is compulsory between the ages of 5 and 16. If you don't send your child to school, you could be put into prison.
But the official year is between 5 and 6. But in Texas, it is mandatory that a child starts school at 6 maximum.
My quest for more insight made me visit a clinical psychologist to know if there are psychological effects on a child that begins schooling at an early age.
Child start dealing with identity issues, start forming their own identity at the beginning of their teenage age. Right, that is where you start seeing them mingle with more friends. You start seeing them going out of the shadows of their parents. You start seeing them lock in their room, want to have their own privacy and all of that, until that developmental task is successfully resolved. If you throw the child to further pressures from tertiary education, you further confuse that child because the identity is not fully formed. Again, like I say, throwing a word of caution, you can't be blanket, because there are individuals who, even though they get to school very early, they've shown to be exceptional in terms of their intelligence, and you can't deprive them.
This educationist wants the policy to begin from this September, as they call on the government to ensure that schools do not admit pupils under the age of 5.
We need to even be empathetic with all the stakeholders. The government wants to do right. What age is government recommending for a child that is coming into primary 1 this September to enter? We'll be able to resolve this problem.
Schools are so expensive. Nobody wants to go into primary 6 because they want to cut off that 1 year payment of school fees. Who is helping them with that?
At the end, the nexus between the policy and educationists is that exceptional children should not be deprived the opportunity of being educated at an early age, especially those who can cope academically and psychologically.
Should this policy be allowed to stay, there are fears that over 80% of graduating students from our secondary schools may not be able to write WAEC or NECO, as they are mostly below age 18. Helen Osamede Akins, TVC News, Abuja.